Okay, so here we have a Dave built running on red oak acorns that were not really dried down. They were left outside to air dry, and it's really cold, so they barely dried down at all. And they're just not even cracking and not even really running through. Not doing diddly squat. So this tells me that you can't not dry your acorns, at least using the Dave built, which is such an efficient nutcracker. But yeah. I just want to add that between these two videos, I dehydrated the red oak acorns at 135 degrees for about 24 hours, and then cracked them in the Dave built. So they're hard, dried acorns that are broken mostly into halves, because that's the way that the cotyledon forms inside the nut. Yeah, it wouldn't hurt to dehydrate more time at this moment. Okay, so I cracked these red oak acorns in a Dave built, and then this is the product that it yielded. And then I shook them in a bucket, just in a 5-gallon bucket with a lid like I do with chestnuts, and then I winnowed it, and this is the product before picking through. So there are some retainers, but more shaking would have fixed that. Some small pieces of shell, but it's like 90% nut meat. And here's what winnowed off. And I mean, you can pick through this much faster. You don't have to pick out individual kernels, you just have to pick out the bad stuff, and that goes really quickly. So I gotta, yeah, that's where I'll leave it. So I picked through the halves pieces a little bit more, and they're not black and rotty from the maggots. And then I'm grinding in my masa mill, and this is grinding super well and super easy. Just really smooth and nice, and it seems like the flour is being made with really not much force. Okay, so I'm just pouring out the water from the leeching bucket. It's about 1 gallon in here in a 5-gallon bucket. I fill it about 4 gallons every day, twice a day. And it's been about a week, maybe a week and a half, and it's tasting like it's leached enough. So we got that. Tasty enough. These have been going for about 3 weeks now, and these were just pieces of acorn that I've been leeching instead of grinding before leeching, and they still taste bad. Yeah, these taste worse for sure than the flour. Oh. So don't do that. Now I'm straining out the liquid, and some of the fines are coming through in there, and I'm sifting those in this cheesecloth. It looks like that's holding it in a little bit better. Yeah, super labor intensive, even just to strain. And I'm straining so that I can dehydrate it again so that we can use it like a normal flour. Okay, here's a bit on the final result. So I took that ground leached flour and I put it back in the dehydrator so that we could use it like a normal flour, add more flavor via milk. And there's still, you can barely taste any tannins. Me and Emma couldn't, and one of my girlfriend could, but when in the pancakes with milk, I believe the protein neutralizes the tannins, because tannins bond to protein and bind up protein, and that usually happens on your tongue, but that doesn't happen if you add a protein to it from the get-go. So here's a 50-50 flour and red oak acorn pancake. There was no tannins, really delicious. The texture was great. It almost had like a buckwheat kind of richness of flavor, and this was 100% acorn. It held together. It's a little crumblier, and probably the flour is just a little, it was only ground with a masa grinder, once while it was dry, but then a lot of the fines poured off during the leaching process. So if this were to be ground a second time, I think maybe the texture would taste better in the 100% red oak acorn flour pancake. But yeah, definitely by far this was a delicious, wonderful pancake that is, that's better than just plain wheat flour. I still don't think it was worth the time that it took, unless you got like a really efficient leaching process and didn't have to clean out your fucking sink every time you poured out the leachate. So there's the final result, and we'll have more experimentation before Nutfest. But yeah, overall successful, and it's definitely a useful flour in the kitchen. Like as useful maybe as buckwheat, even though buckwheat's a lot easier to work with. Harder to grow though. Okay, I'm just in a Walmart parking lot and I got time now, so I wanted to give the full down low on the red oak acorn process. And just so you know, I'm not speaking about the white oak acorn group. I don't have experience with that, and frankly, the red oak produces on years when, like this year, there's no hickory nuts, there's no there's no good wild nuts. The red oaks are still producing because they set their nuts 2 years prior, so they tend to produce in the off years for other nuts, which are more hickory nuts are way more valuable to me. Yeah, so you harvest these acorns when the squirrels are working on them. That ends up being around October 1st, and then you can either dehydrate them right away, or you can just let them sit until you have time in like November, December to dehydrate the nuts. And you have to dehydrate the nuts in shell to make them crack well. So you throw them all in your dehydrator at 130, 140 degrees and dehydrate them for 24 to 36 hours to get the kernel to shrink down a good amount. And if you want them to dry like hard, probably 48 hours would be good. And I reduce the ventilation on my dehydrator so that it doesn't push as much air through and conserves moisture, because the shell is reducing the transpiration. So it doesn't need the airflow that you need for like a fruit leather, for instance. So yeah, you dehydrate them, then you put them through the Dave-Built. Then from the Dave-Built, you put them in a 5-gallon bucket, about 1 gallon at a time, shake them really hard. That dislodges the nuts from inside of the shell and allows them to winnow off really well. And then you winnow them with a high power fan. I was using a 700 cubic foot per minute fan that worked well enough after three batches of winnowing. I recently got a 2,800 cubic foot fan. I would recommend using that in the future. And then if that's not working super well, there's like a little trick for getting extra shell off. And once the shell and the kernel is like kind of flat in a plastic bin from winnowing, or like in a hotel pan from winnowing, you can take your high power fan and blow it across the surface of those nuts, and the shell pieces will fly off a lot better. It just gets like more separation, allows for more flow of that shell. So then those come off, very efficient. Then you pick out all the bad nuts and the shells. Super efficient, super fast process. I was super excited about the speed of the dehydration, Dave-Built, and winnowing process to get clean nuts that are dry. So that was all good. From there, I dehydrated mine a little bit longer just to make sure that they're shelf stable. They should it should hurt your teeth, and the nut should like shatter and fracture when you bite down on it, if they're going to be shelf stable. Otherwise, I mean, maybe with the high tannins they'll be fine, but I had chestnuts mold on me bad this year because they were like still like kind of pleasant to eat, even though they were still fucking hard. They rotted to smithereens and it sucked. So don't do that. The tannins might prevent that. And then from there, you do the the leeching process. That takes about 1 to 1.5 weeks when ground. And yeah, before leeching, you need to grind it. It doesn't work if they're just pieces. It takes too long. At least for cold leaching, there might be an alternative in hot leaching. Cold leaching wasn't super energy intensive. I would just want like a better system if I were going to be doing this as an actual subsistence task, rather than, I don't know, like I'm going to have, 4 gallons of flour, dry flour this year from red oak. That's okay, but it's not much compared to what you need to get by. But yeah, so you grind it in your masa grinder, not in a flour grinder because the oil content is too high. Those are for $40 at the Mexican grocery store, super freaking cheap. So you grind it, then you leach it. That takes about a week to a week and a half, and then from there you strain it with a 16 mesh strainer or just like a normal strainer that you use in the kitchen, and then a cheesecloth for the fines, and then from there you dehydrate it. That dehydration process makes it just like way more usable of a product, in my opinion. You don't have water in your flour, then you can add milk and something freaking flavorful. Yeah. And again, it tasted good. If the leaching process were efficient enough, it tastes good and pleasant. Okay, so there's the whole down low. Yep. Best of luck.